This is a weird game. There's so much that's really anomalous about it. You start off, you're staring at the ground looking at your mummified hands, and you stand up and then you're just going. And every once in a while you'll meet bugs who talk to you. And you seem to be going deeper and deeper into the ground, like a kind of deep chasm, but not every environment looks underground. Sometimes they have lots of grass, sometimes they have lots of diamonds, sometimes they are just oddly colored. There's strings you have to shoot sometimes.
It has a classic style in that sense. Back in the era of games not really making sense and being kind of fever dreams, this game sort of feels like a very short, very tightly designed fever dream.
Yeah, it's when you don't have to make excuses for what you're doing. You know, that level of game design back in the day where it's just like, look, we know that you just want to play something and just have fun. So here's the fun. What's especially unusual about this game is it's so opposite to so many other games nowadays, and that it's less is more. That seems to be the ethos of the design. You only have one weapon. It's not even a gun, although you're acting like it's a gun. It's a boomerang that you shoot out and it comes back to you when you decide to have it come back. You can charge it up to have it shoot out extra far. At some point, and this seems to be the major turning point in terms of the gameplay, you can teleport to that boomerang. And so your shot becomes just as equally importantly your trajectory of movement. You're aiming where you're going to move as much as you're aiming where to attack. So it's that interplay between both that feels new and fresh, even though it's all circling around one literal weapon.
It is a game that makes my heart thump the whole time. It's really stressful and it demands a lot of focus.
Yeah, I told you when I was playing that I kept having to stop because I really truly felt like I'm managing too much at once. And on the surface, that seems impossible considering you're only using one weapon the whole time. But what you're really doing is you're juggling mechanisms of destruction on the basis of what kind of enemies show up, right? It's like, okay, this enemy requires this kind of maneuver, so now I have to put that in my head. And then a new enemy shows up and it's like, oh, they require a totally different way to deal with them. So now I have to put that in my head. And you're kind of moving from those types of reactions back and forth in your brain. And there's so many enemies after a while, and they all have different ways of killing them, that by the end of the game it really felt like Doom Eternal, in the sense that in Doom Eternal you're switching weapons and you use a weapon wheel to go through those weapons. This game, the weapon wheel was in my head the whole time, and I'm just thinking, now I move to this, now I'm just doing a straight shot, now I need to go behind them, now I need to go under them, now I need to run away. Right, so all of that is happening mentally.
The main strong similarity that I see is the way in which each enemy is sort of it's a stepping stone towards fighting other enemies. It feels like the enemies are built off of each other. You're making ammo, you're making tools that you need to kill another enemy by attacking one enemy. It's really cool that way. On top of that, not only are you sort of juggling each enemy's effect on your ability to fight them, you also have to deal with like literally juggling yourself in the air, because the game at a certain point kind of rewards you for staying in the air longer. So you're very non-figuratively juggling yourself by putting yourself like higher and higher into the air, and like always having to consider the position of everything all at once. Right?
Yeah, you become the boomerang.
Yeah.
Weirdly. I mean, I talk about integrating the object of possession with yourself. Like the thing that you're maneuvering and using becomes exactly you. And by the end of the game, you're just flying through the air by flinging yourself again and again and again. And you're also trying to attack.
The game is broken up into these basically individual arenas, and these arenas are the host of just a handful of waves of enemies, right? You know, obviously it's with increasing complexity that these enemies will come at you in the arena, and it's all based on the specific sort of geometry and theme of the arena, so that each one is kind of like its own puzzle room that you're fighting through. It has a lot of really interesting environments that it's throwing at you, and it kind of doesn't give you a lot of time to get your bearings. It's just like, here is this weird crystal cavern. Now that you've conquered that, here's a completely unrelated sort of environment. Yeah. I couldn't quite figure out what the overall theme was for the environments, because I couldn't really make sense of it.
Yeah, I didn't understand what I was trying to do by the end of this. For all I know, we're in hell, and this is the afterlife, and this is just what you do when you die, is you just start going through waves of enemies and arenas. One thing that's funny about the style of game, because it's in an arena, my expectation is, okay, arena style game, I think of like time limits and like speed running. And what's funny about that is the way that I play was as if I was trying to speed run, but there is no time limit. You can take as long as you want in each wave. But I think the incentive to move quickly is strictly because it is so stressful to be so close to dying with all these enemies around you. Like, you just want to get to the relief after the wave as soon as possible because it's just so fast. That was definitely like the feeling I had. Like, when the waves ended, I never just immediately ran to the next arena. I just sort of sat there and would like look around a little bit and just sort of contemplate what I just finished doing. In some ways, this game feels almost like a proof of concept. Like, we might be getting something much bigger down the line. I feel like it deserves something bigger. It has such a great idea, and the movement is so clean. The combat is so clean. It kind of feels like the kind of game that I feel like Valve would have picked up. You know, like what happened with Portal, where Portal used to be this little indie darling game of like, can't remember the name, but some game where you played a young girl and you used portals, but they were like magic portals. And then Valve saw that and like, oh, we're going to pay you money and you're going to make a sci-fi game in our universe. I feel like they would do that to this because it has such a solid idea. But instead we get Devolver Digital as the publisher. So rather than sci-fi it up, we freaked it out. It's now just freakiness the whole way through, and that's a certain kind of appeal too. Speaking of the publisher Devolver, the music is odd. This isn't like Doom Eternal or a lot of the boomer shooters that have been coming out where they're all fast paced, and the obvious connection to fast pace is, oh, therefore I'm gonna have heavy metal riffs and solos. This game has fast paced strings, which certainly matches like the feeling of what I want when I'm playing, but it's definitely an unusual choice. It just fits. Again, I'm going to use the word freaky. It's just a weird, freaky, weird game. It doesn't make sense.
It is such an amazingly obtuse game. And I think that sort of works in its favor, though, because the design is very different. Right, and I think the music and the visual design and just the weirdness of it and basically that freakiness you're talking about kind of serves as an on-ramp for just thinking outside the box and like playing something that is uniquely itself, right? And that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, you just embrace it for what it is. You don't ask too many questions because the answer is going to be Centipede for some reason.
Yeah.
There is a saving grace, a thing that makes all of this so much more manageable, and that is the fact that at any point in time you can slow down time. That is everything to this game. I think so much of what makes the design work is that it's both extremely fast-paced and yet fully within your control to calm down when necessary. Those breathers of time halting or at least slowing down feels like those are the moments I'm actually breathing and blinking again. Every other moment my eyes are wide open, drying out in the air, and every other moment I'm holding breath.
The game gives you a lot so that it can expect more from you, right? Like it gives you an extremely overpowered mechanic in the context of most games. Like most games do not allow you to have essentially unlimited slow motion like this game does, but because they do that, it allows them to make these arenas just like mind-bogglingly filled with different things that are vying for your attention. And the game does a really good job, especially with the sound design and the visual design, telling you what you need to do at any given moment. Because you can only see your little cone of vision, right? It's in first person, which is inherently very disorienting. It would have been much easier if the game were somehow third person, right? It would be a very different game, but it would be easier. But it often feels like the first person aspect isn't a detriment because there's so many ways to hear and see what is going on around you that I think there's a lot of really clever touches like that.
Yeah, for as difficult as the game feels in terms of moment to moment mechanics, like how much movement you have to do, it's actually highly forgiving. So like you mentioned that in third person perhaps it would be easier. I think one of the reasons that would be the case is you could actually see what's right behind you, and this game you're constantly surrounded. But they managed to find a way to be somewhat forgiving about your proximity to enemies in that you don't immediately get damaged as soon as you touch an enemy. I don't know if you noticed, but when you touch an enemy or get very close to them, the sound kind of increases slowly. It goes like it's building, and the edge of the screen starts to darken, and it's like letting you know, okay, better move. right now. And it knows that you're going to bump into them through no fault of your own. And so it accommodates that. And it makes sure that the visual language is as straightforward and immediately recognizable as possible, so that you have no one to blame but yourself if you're not able to defeat any new enemy that arises. It doesn't even tell you how to defeat every enemy. Like, literally, the language is so clear that they will just introduce a new enemy. You see where the red is, it's like that's your target, and then you're just thinking on the fly, how do I get to that target as quickly as possible? And that's the game design. All in all, I was surprised by the game. You didn't warn me at all the kind of experience I was going to have, but I'm glad that I went through it. It is such a short experience that I can't imagine not recommending it to everyone. Like, just play it. You know, just you'll get through it, you'll finish it, and you'll definitely have done something unique by the end. You'll feel like, oh, that was something special. You know, even if what's special about it isn't like, you know, it's not the greatest game of all time, but it's so tight in terms of its goal and what it's trying to do. It doesn't aim too high.